Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another TacTile session. Uh, I'm your host, Joe, creator of TacTile, and we're gonna talk some TacTile strategy, play some TacTile games. So I just got off a really great board game meetup with some great creators. Alex, the creator of Vending Machine Games over at Smog City Brewing. We were playing some board games, playing some Tactile. Everybody was having a great time. So I wanted to continue to ride that high and play some Tactile and talk some Tactile strategy. So been having a lot of fun playing a lot of Tactile games with people, especially here on the BGA. Um, and one thing I've noticed is that it's always better to learn tactile with someone who's played tactile a couple times, has a pretty good sense of the strategy. So that's why I want to just kind of keep making these stream videos, kind of, for everybody who has to kind of learn it on their own or maybe learn it with some friends. That's a great way to do it, but I think it's always helpful to have someone to talk about some of the deeper thoughts of tactile with, especially as you get into those mid game and late game scenarios. It can be a little challenging to kind of see the vision, see the line of how you can kind of quickly win games, quickly end games. So I want to be able to make these videos, kind of talk about some things, some tips that help me. So hopefully it helps everybody else and we can all get better at tactile together and continue to have kind of fun, challenging games. So I'm going to go ahead and play a game here, show you guys kind of my thought process once again as I play tactile. But before we dive into it, I kind of want to go ahead and summarize a couple quick tactile tips, some things to think about as you guys are thinking about your tactile games. So once again, quickly summarizing the strategy of tactile, there's two components to it. So component number one is your engine building strategy. That's understanding when to buy a move, when to buy a push, when to buy a gain. And the second component is the color strategy, the positional strategy, which is basically thinking about your board and what your board makeup should be and how to use your board as you get from the start to the finish of the game so that you kind of win as quickly as possible. Okay, so those are the two components. So the first thing I want to talk about is when you're learning to play tactile, the first part of learning to play tactile and getting good at tactile is learning how to win the game quickly, right? And the reason why this is so important is you need to be a threat to your opponent. They need to feel that if they don't do anything that they can to stop you, you're going to just win the game, right? And in order to get to that point, you need to understand how to win the game as quickly as possible. Then you become a threat. Then your opponent feels forced to react to you, and that's how you and tactile in its later stages, as everybody gets better, as we get into these more competitive setups. Tactile is a very counter based strategy where, oh, I know they're going to do this, so I need to do this so that I'm ready for it when they do it. It's kind of like, that you guys are checking each other all the way to the finish. Okay. But to get to that point, you have to feel that you have to check your opponent, that if you don't stop them, they're going to just, go crazy and run train on you and win the game. Okay. So, what does it take to win the game quickly? So, tactile is it's a racing game, right? You're trying to get from point A to point B as quickly as possible. To do that, these move cards are going to be really critical. The move cards make you move fast. It helps you get to the finish and win the game. Now, moves on their own are not enough. What you need is a pathway to follow. All right. So the moves make you faster, and the pathway is built by the colors of the board. So if you want to win the game as quickly as possible, you want to find the most efficient pathway and you want to stack moves on it, and that's how you can kind of race to the finish as quickly as possible. If you could find a two color or a one color pathway, a bunch of yellow tiles in a row, you buy a bunch of yellow moves, you hop on that yellow pathway, you're going to race to the finish and win the game as quickly as possible. Okay? Now you have to really make sure that it's you have a pathway all the way to the end. What often happens is people focus on the kind of early game of tactile. They focus on the colors that are nearby them, or they focus more on maybe the mid game of tactile. As we look at this board here, I could easily see somebody buying a bunch of maybe blue and green cards because blue and green will take you 80% of the way there. But fundamentally, to finish, so if you say you were red and you were trying to get to green, right? And if you just bought blue and green moves, you'd be able to get 80% of the way to the finish. But fundamentally, you'd be missing the yellow and the red tiles, which are the last two tiles, which is what you need to score. And that's going to be a major obstacle at the end of the game. We call it the one tile mile, or having one tile that you cannot cross. That can be a huge, huge barrier. So before you try to score anything, you're going to need to make sure you have at least a red or a yellow, or preferably both moves. Because if you are not prepared for the end game, you're going to have a heck of a time trying to finish if you were red player trying to go to green home. Does that make sense? This is a perfect example. Someone could very easily focus on this early game setup of this green and blue and be absolutely in trouble when it gets to the finish because they do not have the red and yellow, which is fundamentally what they're going to need in the late game. So, in order to finish, you need to know that you need to plan for that late game, and you need to look out for those moves that are going to get you there quickly. Okay, so that is how in the early stages of TacTile, if you focus on nothing else than finding a good pathway and getting the moves and the speed and sequencing them correctly so that you can get to the end fast, that is how you beat a lot of new players. That's going to win you a lot of games in the beginning. Okay, now once you start to play TacTile a little bit, you realize how important gains are. Okay, so the next phase of TacTile is learning how to play defense. And defense is a lot harder than offense in TacTile. Offense is very simple. Offense is get moves, go fast. Defense is tricky because defense requires you to also play offense. See, a lot of people in TacTile, they try to just buy a bunch of pushes and they try to sit by their home base and they try to like cycle those pushes. And that's what they think defense is. It's just kind of like mildly shoving the opponent and like hoping to eventually outbuild them. But that doesn't really work because if an opponent knows how to win the game quickly and is able to find a pathway and is able to invest in it, they will beat you. They will overcome you, and you will just be in this push cycle where you're buying a bunch of pushes, but that pushes don't help you win the game. You're just kind of slowing them down, but you aren't actually stopping them, and then eventually they make it in. So just getting a bunch of pushes and sitting in a corner is not a strategy that will actually win. It'll slow down your opponent, but it won't win. So how do you actually stop someone? So the trick with defense in TacTile is that you cannot stop someone. You cannot finish them. You can only slow them down long enough for you to take the lead, right? And that is the fundamental mindset change, is that you are actually just trying to outpace your opponent. You're not trying to stop them. You're trying to slow them down, get them off kilter so that you are now in front of them, and now they must slow you down and stop you. So in order to do that, your whole goal is to actually basically slow them down, put them slightly behind you, and then you take that lead and you have the advantage. You have the pathway and the moves, and you're racing to the finish, and now it's up to them to stop you. Okay? So in order to do that, you're also going to be competing for the moves. So to get those moves, you're going to need gains. So what you'll find is that a player who takes a little bit of time in the beginning of the game and picks up a gain or two is going to have a much easier time in the end game controlling the market, buying the moves they need, and finishing the game. And so you want to know how to finish the game quickly, which is that move and color pathway strategy, because that's going to be critical at any stage of the game. You always need to know how to finish a game and win a game, right? The second piece, though, is you want to know how to, you want to be able to build an investment engine and then know how to delay your opponent. So, because what's usually going to happen is you're building this investment engine, your opponent's just going straight for the win, right? They're going to get those moves, they're going to try to build that pathway, they're going to try to finish as fast as possible. You need to know how you can build an investment engine, delay them long enough for that investment engine to kick in, and then you switch over to offense, because there's you can be ahead in positioning, and you could be ahead in cards in TacTile, and that could be an even balance. And what I mean by that is if somebody's really close to your base, they're ahead in positioning. They're more likely to win than you are because they're closer to your base than you are to theirs. But then there's cards, and a person, you can kind of trade off positioning for cards. If you're letting the other person get moves while you're setting up an investment engine, you're trading positioning for cards, right? But if you have both cards and positioning, you're going to win. Okay, if you are closer to their base than they are to yours, and you have more cards than them, you've got the game in the bag. Okay, so what you're trying to do is you're trying to set up an investment engine while they kind of gain some ground on you. Then you're trying to delay them enough that you can kind of get in front of them. And then with the better investment engine and with equal or better positioning, you'll win the game 100% of the time. Okay. And then what ends up happening is they know that they can't afford to lose that late game. They can't afford to let you get equal positioning with a better investment engine because you'll win 100% of the time. And it'll force them to spend some time building an investment engine as well. And this is where the game starts to get really complex and interesting because it's this balance of setting up your investment engine, which typically incorporates a nice balance of gains and pushes, because that is pushes are like the Swiss Army knife of TacTile. They To use them correctly, it's you don't want to just be kind of shoving the other person back. That's not enough. You want to be putting them in positions where they're forced to go backwards to activate their cards, where they can't activate their cards at all. And it's that threat of those positions that will force the other person to react to your investment engine that will effectively delay them long enough for you to kind of get the positioning and the cards that you need in order to win. And this kind of delicate balance of counterplay and trying to suss out when is actually a good time for you to pivot from investment to attacking to back on defense investment based on how much time you actually think you have before they could win the game versus how much time you need before you could win the game. That is really the counterplay and strategy of TacTile. But it all boils down from this original starting place of you need to fundamentally understand how to win a game quickly. And so the starting level is just understand how valuable moves are, understand how to suss out a nice pathway and how to get the moves and when to get the moves so that you can follow that pathway. And then from there, it's that evolving strategy of how to build a gain engine within that context and how to be able to suppress an opponent long enough that no matter where they start, how aggressively they start on you, you can always win in that long term, win in that late game. Okay. And it's difficult for me to truly spell out how to actually do that because the thing about TacTile is every game is so situational with you have to assess the landscape, you have to assess the market, you have to see what is the right way to kind of go about this game, which is always going to be a little different. I can tell you that you probably want to start every game by trying to get a gain and a move. And then after that, you know, it's just going to kind of depend on what are the pivotal points in that game to kind of fight over. Okay. So I don't know how helpful this conversation was. Maybe this clarified a few points for people. Maybe this kind of explains what these games can kind of feel like. Um, but I always think it's better to see things in action. So I'm going to go ahead. I'm going to play a game right now. I'm going to show you guys kind of how I think about the game. Now, it's a little bit more challenging because I'm going to be playing both sides here. So I'm going to be doing a lot of thinking while also trying to do a lot of talking. So we're just going to have to see how it goes. But that being said, let's play some TacTile. Okay, so the first things first is we're playing starts versus sides, which means I need to pick a corner. Now, an important thing to remember about starts versus sides is that whatever corner I pick, my opponent is going to be the opposite corner. So I'm not just thinking about this corner in terms of where I want to go, I'm thinking about this in terms of where I want to force my opponent to go, which is actually a little bit more important, right? I want to put my opponent in the worst corner possible, and I want to put myself in the best corner possible, knowing that my opponent is going to get to take the first move. Okay, so let's take a look at this market. So the first thing you want to look at is the market. And right away, I see that we have two different colors of gains. We have blue gains and green gains. Okay, and I always try to go for a gain first. I think that investment engine piece is critical to winning games of TacTile, and the earlier you get it going, the better off you'll be. I think it's way easier to win a game with a strong investment engine than a strong move engine, because an investment engine will get you a strong move engine. Okay. Yeah, I think you need both, but I think I always prioritize investment first. So right off the bat, I think actually the green gain is going to be stronger than the blue gains. And the reason is because I already see a green move in the market, and a gain move combo is extremely powerful. So I'm thinking I want to be in a spot where I can get that green gain and I can get that green move as soon as possible. If I get both of those, I think I think that's gonna be a good indicator for me winning the game. I won't say the game's gonna be wholly in the bag, but I would say if I get both of those, chances are this game is as good as done. So to get the green gain, I'm gonna need to start near a red tile, and there's actually 3 corners that all start near a red tile. So it's looking like I'd want to be yellow, green, or blue. Now, The problem is that if I pick yellow or blue, my opponent will also start near a red tile. And since I know my opponent is myself, we're probably going to both be going for that green gain, which means the only corner I can actually start in where my opponent will not be able to get that green gain before me is the green corner. So I want to start in the green corner and force my opponent to take the red corner, which is actually a very interesting decision. And the reason why is because there's no green tiles near the green corner, right? So this is actually a bit of a risk to start in this corner. Even if I do get that green gain, it's going to be a while before I'll be able to use it. That being said, it does mean that green tiles are going to be plentiful in the late game. So this is actually really beneficial from a mid game, late game strategy standpoint. So I'm actually okay with this decision. It's a little risky. My opponent could potentially, this is one of those situations where an opponent could try to go push first, and it actually would be very effective because if I am stuck in this corner, nowhere near the card I just bought, my opponent might have plenty of time to actually use that against me. But let's see what my opponent does. So my opponent is going to be starting in the red corner, and now in this case, blue is actually extremely strong for my opponent. So I think my opponent's just going to go ahead and try to pick up the blue gain, not try to get fancy with the push strategy. That blue highway that runs across the middle of the board is actually really strong. So it's don't have to get fancy with it because honestly, if the right blue pops up, that blue highway could possibly be even stronger um, than the green gains. So it's kind of like there's no point in trying to risk anything. Just kind of hope for the right cards to show up later in the game, and this situation's going to solve itself. All right, so my opponent. Oh, right off the bat, that gain went ahead and triggered an automatic reset, and I'm already in a tough spot as green player because I am nowhere near buying the green gain that I was hoping for, and my opponent is actually in a really great position to now set up and pick up some move cards as well. Ooh. Okay, so I have two reds. Red is virtually useless. I would still like to continue to try to pick up that green gain, but this is actually a pretty tough position here. My opponent has already got a gain card and is setting up to purchase a move card as well. I think the green move by picking up a green resource. So my opponent is actually setting up to just perfectly take advantage of this middle area, race over to the finish, and kind of win the board. So I'm actually in a really bad spot. These red resources are not going to be helpful at all. If my opponent gets green and they have a blue move, they're going to basically be able to take over almost 80% of the board before they hit any resistance. So this might be a good time to pivot, actually. Man, I am in such a tight spot here. I have to go over here to get blue, but if I do that, I'll be nowhere near the green. I'm going to try to get over to the green as quickly as possible. I'm going to swap my red resources for probably a blue here, given the value of blue in this market. I'm trying to pivot strategy here because I think I have to combat my opponent and try to accelerate as quickly as I can in the short term. If I just give my opponent 80% of the board, the game will just be over. There'll be nothing I can do. I think I try to get this red gain instead and focus on more of a short-term strategy. Or I potentially just reset the market here because my reds are kind of useless actually. And my opponent is actually... Do I reset here? Actually, maybe I reset. You know what? I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to reset because My reds are useless. My opponent's setting up to take a move and a gain situation. Actually, I think this is better for me. If my opponent wants to take that green gain, they're going to have to take 2 gains on different colors. Otherwise, I can swap and buy and get a move right off the bat, which is actually not too bad. I could have a move. I could take advantage of this red-green situation potentially. Yeah, I think this was definitely a better choice. My opponent is not really in a good position to try to steal one of these moves from me. So my opponent is going to. There's no blue moves. I think my opponent's going to try to gain blue and hop on this blue highway and try to just stack value on that blue given the new situation. And then I'm going to go ahead and swap for blue and buy a move. And now I have some acceleration capability, and I'm not quite as in a bad situation here. My opponent, in the meantime, is going to go ahead and continue to stack on this blue of this push card here. Pushes standalone, not too strong in the beginning, but the moment you get 2 pushes, they start to become really dangerous. All right, so I now have some movement ability. I'm going to need gain ability soon, so I'm going to try to go for this green gain here. All right, what's my opponent going to do? The green, not super helpful for my opponent. My opponent needs moves, which is going to require a yellow resource. Gonna do some overdrive here, actually. Gonna overdrive the push and another ability to get on this yellow tile. Get yellow. Overdrive is a really powerful ability. The simplest way to use it is just to turn 2 actions into a move. That's always going to be very powerful. However, I think the most powerful way to use overdrive is actually to unlock the buy button. And what I mean by that is generally you can only buy one card per turn because you're limited by it's a basic action and it's not something that you can buy a card of, so you can only do 1 per turn without overdrive, which is a big limiter. It basically means no matter how many gains you have, you can only buy 1 card per turn. It kind of diminishes the value of gain cards. But with overdrive, you can exhaust 2 cards to do any action, so you can buy multiple times in a turn if you have enough available actions. That's crazy powerful, just simply because actions are so valuable, and outpacing an opponent in actions is an easy way to win almost any game. So I love to use overdrive to buy tons of cards. That's why it's so valuable to stack actions of the same color. It gives you a lot more cards you can overdrive with. If you can stack gains, you can supercharge your engine and get to 10 plus cards in no time at all. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and gain green and buy this gain. Got a nice move gain engine. My favorite 2 cards to start, very powerful. My opponent has a gain push engine. That is really powerful in a situation like this where they have a lot of colors in a row. Basically, instead of trying to get additional flexibility, they're just taking advantage of the existing board setup and just trying to stack a bunch of cards of the same color. In this case, we see another blue gain just came out. That's going to be extremely powerful. I wonder what my opponent... So it's interesting because my opponent has the resources to purchase this push card. So what they're going to do is they're going to buy the push. And I was originally planning to just pick up a move here, but given the fact that another blue gain just came out, I'm going to go ahead and actually move backwards in this situation. Allows me to gain a green. And then I'm going to actually overdrive here to go ahead and gain a blue. And I'm now set up to double stack and get 2 gains and take advantage of this massive blue highway, which is going to be extremely devastating in a second here. Basically, don't need to buy moves when you have enough cards in overdrive, right? These 2 pushes are essentially a move. Adding a gain into this, except they're better than a move because they can be literally whatever action. I just used them as a gain here, right? So red is actually positioned to massively run away with this blue highway here just by stacking a ton of blue cards and taking advantage of the fact that they can just continuously activate them basically all the way up to the end of the game. So really, really powerful with overdrive. You want to color stack like crazy, especially gains. Super, super strong. All right, so my other teammate here is now going to be able to take advantage of both these cards here. Basically has a nice red-green engine. And so this is a very classic way to use your cards, which is to kind of stagger 2 pieces. This piece is going to continuously activate red for extra movement. This piece is going to continuously activate green for extra resources. Notice there's points where there's going to be red tiles over here. So once this following trailing piece catches up to the green, I'll be able to pivot and have this one activate for extra movement while this one will activate for resources. By staggering my pieces this way, I'm going to be able to continuously activate them all the way up to the end zone. And you know how I keep talking about these 2 color highways? Well, take a look. Red-green is a nice 2 color highway all the way to the end zone from the starting point of the green tile. In other words, if I do nothing else for the rest of this game, my green player is set up to just continuously activate all the way to the end zone and has a very clear shot on goal, right? Whereas red player still has to cross that red-yellow obstacle, which I talked about earlier as being a big threat. So green actually has the better path on goal, but red player has a single color path, which is a little bit more powerful, a little bit riskier, a little bit higher risk situation if they get knocked off, but more powerful in terms of the ability to stack and gain value is easier with a single color highway, right? So green might actually have to change strategy and kind of react and play some defense because I actually think as this game stands right here, even though red has a better pathway in terms of continuous pathway, that single color pathway is more powerful, and red player is actually going to beat green player if things continue as they are. So I think green might have to react and play a little defense moving forward. So, okay. So let's go ahead and see. So we got a gain here as green player. That being said, a lot of chatter. Got to turn it into reality. Again, there aren't a ton of red or green resource costing cards in the market. Another weakness on the green player side of the game. They don't have a lot of cards they can buy. They don't have the stronger pathway. They're going to need to try to buy some time here if they want to have a chance on victory. So we know our opponent has a blue and a green. They're going to be picking up this blue gain next turn. There's not a lot we can do to stop them. So as green player, could potentially set up to buy some yellow cards. That's not super helpful. Another red move would be great, but it costs yellow, which we do not have, which is, again, another weakness. So we're going to go ahead and gain a green here. And I actually think we might want to swap for... let's just go ahead and gain a red. And then let's see what happens once our opponent purchases a card. Maybe we're going to get lucky here and then not have to worry about resetting or swapping. Sometimes you get lucky, team. That's what we got to count on. Ooh, see? Got lucky. What I mean by that is this move costs 1 yellow, 1 green. As green player, we're halfway to that, which means we can swap and buy next turn and pick up a little additional acceleration. Red player might have a stronger engine, but at the end of the day, those moves get you positional strength. And remember how I said you can have positional strength or card strength and potentially win? If you have both, you definitely win. Well, in this case, green is in a better position to gain positional strength because they have more move potential. So blue player is going to have to figure, or red player is going to have to figure out how to turn up the defense if they want to still have a chance. Positional strength is always stronger than card strength because ultimately positional strength is how you win the game. That being said, I would not call it in any direction at this point, given given the fact that each player is leading in one particular regard. All right, so check it out. Red player has 4 cards, double the number of cards of green player, right? Because of that really powerful single color engine. But they're only valuable as long as they can activate them. And red player continues to not have a move. So let's see what happens here. So actually, I think the strategy is going to be to move onto blue here, right? That activates this entire engine. And then we're going to overdrive. And we're going to go ahead and turn. We're going to go ahead and turn those pushes into a move so that we can move. Here onto yellow, and then go ahead and gain double yellow. There's 2 moves that cost double yellow, and we know that red move is going to be critical, that yellow move as well potentially for late game potential. So we're going to have red players start to work on picking up those and adding them to their engine. Okay, so green player is just going to go ahead and swap and pick up a yellow, trading out a red so that they can pick up that green move. Really good acceleration in their engine. A little bit nervous about the fact they're falling behind in the card game here, but definitely powerful to be able to pick up that green move. They have a much faster way towards the end game here by getting that additional move in their engine. In the meantime, red player continues to accelerate rapidly. Little scary. Definitely want to keep an eye on that. But they've hit a slowdown here. Their trailing pawn is stuck. It is trapped. This could be a big challenge for them because they are going to need they're going to need to do something about that trailing pawn. They're going to go ahead and take a turn, not get a lot done, but set themselves up on this blue highway. Whereas and then basically red player has now positioned themselves to race to the finish here. There's nothing but red and blue in between them and the exit. They have red and blue. They are now in position to win the game rapidly and can now pivot and switch to an acceleration phase and try to finish the game. Whereas green player needs to watch out. They still have kind of a ways to go. Let's see what happens. Okay, so green player is in danger. Red player has way more cards and is positioned to finish. How is green player going to respond? So one good way to respond might be to actually physically block in this case, right? Because we know that red player is trying to get onto this blue tile. So it actually might make sense to just physically get in their way in this situation. Could also overdrive a push here. That wouldn't be the end of the world either. Might actually do that. Want to continue to move forward here. Gonna go ahead and overdrive a push using my gain card. We know they don't have any green moves, so we know that that's going to be a big obstacle. And then we're going to go ahead and kind of gain additional positioning ground as green player here. Okay, so we've kind of slowed them down, and we're going to continue to accelerate because we know our move position is currently stronger. Our opponent does not have a good move position. So they're going to have to react to us. Hmm. 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 Okay. So we have that red move. Hmm. So we know this green area is really strong for our opponent here. So what we might actually do is we might actually push them here. Because in a delayed game, the double stacked blue gains might just buy the victory here. So we're gonna actually slow them down by pushing. Now notice how we push them so that the blue tile and the yellow tiles are in between this green piece and this green and red area. So in other words, our green player needs green or red tile or green or red tiles to activate their cards, and currently one of their pieces is stranded. Not only that, their other piece is not able to activate both cards, so they are actually kind of stuck a little bit here, not able to activate everything that they want to. It's not that bad though, because those yellow resources are actually really powerful right now. So our other piece is able to take advantage of being stranded, pick up some critical resources, and then continue to reposition and continue to accelerate for this fight. All right. Red player continues to struggle. Their pawns are getting more and more separated, with one piece just being kind of stuck by the home base. That's a really bad and dangerous position. You do not want to be stuck near the home base with one of your pieces. That's going to be a major problem later in the game. So for that, red player is going to actually take a willing, I think, delay here to go ahead and try to fix their positioning. So they're going to go ahead and move onto red, move onto blue, activating this whole engine. They're going to need to overdrive and turn their pushes into a move. It's taking a pretty big delay here to get onto this yellow tile so they can gain yellow, and buy the yellow move. I want to continue to add to that move engine here. Not super able to use it in this position, but it is definitely going to be powerful in the late game. And notice how red player has just completely outstripped green player in terms of the cards with that double gain engine. That is going to be a huge, huge threat. I think red player pretty much has this game in the bag, even though their positioning is bad. They've just completely outstripped green player with purchases. So the early game advantage green player had by kind of aggressively pursuing moves has already been completely overtaken, and red player has, 3 additional pushes on top of it, as well as another gain. I just think there's no way that green player is going to come back from this. Um, oh, and they have a push to continue to delay their opponent. So green player here, you go ahead and buy a push. Ooh. Move onto green. Can gain a yellow. And then go ahead and move a little closer here. Try to delay their opponent a little bit more. And now red player is just going to go ahead and start very rapidly accelerating here. So by moving on to yellow. They're able to gain a yellow resource here, and then move on to blue, allowing them to gain a blue resource, overdrive into a purchase, and then gain a maybe overdrive into another move and try to get some better positioning here. Okay, so our green player needs to basically sprint for the finish here. They have a yellow resource. They could pick up a blue here. Try to continue to stack red cards here. Oh, gonna need to refresh here. A little bit buggy. Not a big deal. Quick refresh solves a lot of things. And then continue to push and try to trap their opponent's pawn on this blue tile. Ooh. All right, so green player has finally gotten a second gain. I think 2 gains is critical in every single game. If you don't have 2 gains, you're going to be in a pretty tight spot. Green player has managed to finally secure their second gain. They're way behind in the card game. However, they do have better positioning here, being kind of at their opponent's door with a clear pathway on goal, while their opponent is a trailing pawn trapped on this isolated blue tile, unable to kind of rush forward and finish the game. But once our opponent is able to finally free their trailing pawn of this jail tile, our opponent is probably in the better position to win. But if we can keep that trailing pawn trapped long enough, green player might be able to pull a rapid victory out of this. This is overdrive, so 5-6 cards is plenty of cards to win. You can just convert everything else into moves as much as you need. So green is actually dangerously close to potentially sneaking in a quick victory here, even as red continues to have the more powerful engine. But red has a ton of pushes, and if they decide to start actually using them to push, they might be able to do some real damage here to green. So let's see what happens. So red is going to go ahead and get to activate some resources here. We just had a refresh, and we actually see some green moves have showed up in the market. Going to be really, really dangerous for green because red is finally probably going to be able to escape. So as red, probably want to see how we could pick up a green move, and I do see a pathway here to pull it off. They're going to go ahead, do a little, we call it do-si-do action, where they go backwards to activate a move so that they can activate their gain engine, and then go ahead and purchase a green move. And then they are going to go ahead and activate it. And red is finally out of their jail. And they have 3 pushes to really make their opponent suffer. So let's see what they might choose to do here. All right, very simple. Just knock them back to that familiar jail spot. We know our opponent is trapped. Red now has equivalent positioning and a stronger card lead. As I said before, you can have more cards or you can have better positioning, but if you have both, the game is in the bag. I think red has officially won at this point, getting to a position of equal positioning strength with a 4-card lead. This is a great example of how games win games. Even though our opponent had a better starting position, red just kind of ran away with this game, was able to keep our opponent at bay while they built up a card lead. And then now in the late game, there's not going to be very much that green can do to try to stop them. This blue tile continues to be an obstacle for green. Maybe they're. I think the best thing that they can do now is to just try to um, pick up some of these gains here. And that's just kind of it. Let's see if that'll be enough. I mean, green is in a position now where they could probably finish the game pretty quickly. They have what? One, two, three moves, four, five, six moves. One, two, three, four, five, six. So technically, if nothing changed about this position, green could actually win the game on the next turn. Because with overdrive, they could convert pushes and gains into moves. And however, I wouldn't be surprised if red could actually win the game on this turn, given the strength of their engine here. First of all, let's see if they can buy any additional moves. That red move in particular would be pretty strong, given its coloration and the fact that our guy red here needs to eventually cross red to score. I do see a pathway for them to go ahead and pick it up, so they're going to go ahead and get that red move. Yep. So red is not able to win this turn, but notice how just one push action, pushing green beyond this blue tile, requires so much effort to get green past this blue tile. A single push is generating probably 2 to 3 actions worth of equity here. This is a great way to use pushes, of just kind of constantly keeping your opponent behind tiles they don't have moves on. It requires so much effort to get past those tiles. It's way more value than that single one push is. And it's just a consistent thorn in their side. This is the most effective way to build action advantage in the game, is to just kind of find those tiles, find those places where they have to kind of go around and they can't just go through. Um, 1 or 2 pushes can create tons of equity, which is a great way to slow them down, allow you time to build up your card advantage, allow you time to win in the late game. As you can see here, red is actually in position to go ahead and win on the next turn, and green, unfortunately, just there is nothing they can do about it. They have officially lost. They just It just took them too long to kind of get their gain engine going, and their move equity was not strong enough in the early game to make enough of a difference here. Red was able to really build up a card advantage on them, so by the time it became a foot race, they were in a much better position to go ahead and win. And so once again, we see how these just monocolor lines are so powerful in TacTile. Looking out for them, finding ways to stack gains on a monocolor line, that has got to be one of the most powerful things in this game. I highly recommend for looking these out. This is a killer strategy in this game. Something you definitely want to look out for. Okay, so there's not really much to say here. I think we do have actually an opportunity here to pick up a blue move. So green can kind of, for honor here, buy a blue move and eliminate this jail cell that they've been stuck in the whole game. We like that, you know, kind of feels good. Feels good to escape, and can kind of have a point on the board, be able to say, "Oh, next turn I would have won." But the reality is green never stood a chance this game and got completely decimated. But hey, you know, for honor, right? It felt good. Felt good. Okay, and now red is just gonna go ahead and activate this absolutely gigantic engine and go ahead and steamroll to the finish here using overdrive, of course, to convert these pushes and moves and gains into moves. Critical component of any game, to convert that defense and kind of ongoing gain potential into moves at the end, to go ahead and score and win. Okay, thanks you guys for joining. I hope that was informative. I hope we were able to dive a little deeper into the strategy. I'm continuing to kind of practice how I explain this. I think the strategy of TacTile is, of course, quite complex, but as you start to wrap your head around it, as you start to get better at it, it's such a beautiful thing because it's always different every game, and it's so interesting to try to find that winning pathway, winning strategy that's going to do it. It's easy in retrospective to say the critical places, but to prospectively find them, to find them in the moment, that is the secret sauce. And when you're able to do it, it's a really, really satisfying feeling. So thank you guys for joining. I hope this was informative, and stay tuned for some more really cool TacTile action. All right. Take it easy, y'all. Have a good rest of your weekend. All right. Bye-bye.